Welcome back to the shop. I don't know if you remember or not, but remember the sloppy shifter shaft issue we had? Well, we finally got the parts in to fix the transmission and the customer saved up to do the repair, so we're ready to rock and roll. Now this one had the shifter slop so bad that over time it wore that shifter shaft down to nothing. So that's got to be replaced. And to do that, pretty big job. The exhaust has to come off. The rear floorboard has to come off on this side. Both front and rear exhaust comes off. The oil spout comes off. It's best starter kind of comes off and gets out of the way. So a lot has to happen just to fix that. So let's me and you get started. Welcome back to Butler Customs Motorcycle Shop. So here's some of the parts that we've got in. We've got the new outer primary kit set. We have the transmission rebuild as far as gasket wise set. Let's see, what else do we have? We have automatic distributor. What? Okay, this is the shifter shaft seal, starter seal, and all that. We also have the new race and new bearing. I have that. Another seal. We have the new shifter shaft, which looks a whole lot better than the old one that we'll be putting in. And we also have the new shifter lever. This one was wore out and rode on this and wore this out. And so this is going to be nice and new. So we're going to put all of this on today. And also fix his bars. His bars are loose and they just don't need tightening. They're moving, and I can see up in here that he's already tried to put some stuff in between the clamp to stop it. So we're going to put some set screws in there to hold that where it ain't going to go nowhere. So we'll be doing all that today, and let's get started. So just as a refresher, here is our issue, which is rounded off very, very bad. So we got to replace this. To do that, all the gears have to come out of that. So in order to do that, we'll have to get this pulley off here, loosen the belt, slide the belt off. The race has to come out. This nut comes out. This pulley gear comes out. Then, of course, we'll drain the oil on it. To get to access on this side, we will have to pull this exhaust off, and this is this 2-in-1, which can be a pain, and then this as well. This floorboard will come off, this oil spout will come off. I will go ahead and take the starter out because it's just kind of loose up in there, so I'll go ahead and just take it out and get it out of the way. And then we've got room to work in our transmission. Now the transmission drain plug on this 94 is right under here on this side. Now if you go on the other side, there's a drain plug that might look like it goes to the transmission, but it does not. That is your oil drain. Now the teeth on this main shaft look good, so we're not going to be replacing that, thank goodness. So the whole gears will come out as one assembly, and you'll see that. Now this plug here is a pretty good sized plug. It's a 3/4 inch plug here. Not the standard 5/8 like on newer bikes. She was in there good. That one wasn't gonna leak. Okay. There's our oil coming out. The magnet there looks good. Don't see a lot of material in there. That's a great sign. We'll take the drain cap or the fill cap off. That'll help it to drain a little bit faster. All right, the oil drained out pretty quick. I mean, it's not much oil that these take anyway, I think. Oh, maybe right at half a quart is all that they take. So we'll put the plug back in so I can move this drain pan out of the way. We'll put a new O-ring on there. We'll tighten it. I don't know if I'll tighten it as much as what was it? It's how it was, but there we go. Now we'll go to the other side of the bike and we'll start working on getting that pulley off. So I got the belt off by taking the tire axle out and bringing the tire all the way up. If you don't take the axle out, the wheel will not go up far enough with the adjusters to get this belt off. So once I took the axle nut off, the wheel come forward a lot more and I was able then to get this belt off. Now let's work on this pulley. There is a retainer. So I'll take a pair of vice grips because this is turning even if you have it in gear, because the chain's off of the compensator. So I'm not putting a lot of pressure here. I just want this to kind of grab where I can hold, and then I can get a little leverage here. There we go. Good grief. Like it exploded on me. But it did break free. So I'll take this side off, and I guess and then I need to get the impact out. That would help. All right, and that should wiggle out. I might have to get me a little pick to go back behind there. Little pick like that. Oh yeah, and that comes off there. Oh, they had red Loctite in on that. That's why those bolts were coming off so hard. Now, we have this big nut here that holds the pulley on. And this will come off without removing the race. You're going to have an extra long extension socket that fits on here, but then you still worry about messing these threads up. You could tape them real good if you got a socket, but I got this, I don't know what brand it was. It's not a Gems, but this thread's on here. It's reverse thread, I believe. This shaft is. Okay. And then that protects the threads, and then this slides over that and into there. Now I can impact this and get that nut spun free. Usually I can just hold this with my hand because of the impact, but if not, we can put the vice grips back on it. And this is a special design tool that has little cutouts to help with that coming off. All right, so it's not coming off by me just holding this. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. And kind of shakes the whole camera probably like it's an earthquake or something. So I'll take a little wrench, just one that's a short. I'll put it on my center stand, and there's a hole here at the bottom of this cross frame. I'll stick in there, and I want one that's just long enough to catch in the teeth in the bottom. Now it's reverse thread, so I'm actually going to tighten it. Easy enough. take that off, take this out, take that off, and there's our nut. And these are red lock tied on, so they can be tight. Now we should wiggle this. This whole thing comes out. So here's our main seal here. We'll be replacing as well since we're this far in it. So now we'll go to the other side. We got to take our transmission, rear floor pegs. We'll go ahead and take our starter out. I just had these in there so I didn't lose them. We'll take this out as well. And we'll get everything on the other side pulled off, and we can start taking the trapdoor out, the cover and the trapdoor. We've got the exhaust off, the rear peg off, and the starter I just pulled out, took the 2 wires off the top and the trigger. And now we're just going to go ahead and take this cover off. There might be a little bit of oil, so I'm going to hold on to this just in case. There we go. Ooh, it was definitely time for a new gasket, wasn't it? Man, we're going to have time getting that off. Now there was no tension on the clutch. Go ahead and take that out. The umbrella out. There was no tension on the clutch because we've got the clutch basket off, and so we didn't have to worry about that. But if this was under tension, you'd want to pay attention to that. We will check our ramp and our balls and stuff before we put that back together, and we'll clean it all up. All right, let's get this spout here out. There we go. And all this is just a cover. There's not oil that comes out, so you don't have to worry about that, because this dipstick goes way down in there and the oil's down below here. So here's our trap door. This is our neutral switch. I've already disconnected it. I've already got the bolts out because I was just kind of curious on the inside. We can raise this up. Put these in here. I got the other bolts in the other box. So I'll get you in here and let you see why we have to pull this transmission apart to get this shaft out, because you can't pull it out without taking all the gears out. Wish you could. It would save a whole lot of labor, time, and money as far as gaskets, but by the looks of things, it needed a good little overhaul anyways. We'll get this drum out next. We'll hold these paws up, get the drum out. I would usually wear gloves doing all this, but it's so hot that sweat just runs all out your elbows and all down on whatever you're working on. So we're just going to get greasy. Now I'll lift this up and hold it up, and I will lift this up out of the way. Now you have this arm here, roller bearings in there. We'll inspect that. You have these cams here. Here's your drum. You have a detent pin here that you can inspect. You can pull this circlip off, washer off, then this will come off like this. But I usually take a flathead small screwdriver in there and just kind of see what kind of tension I've got. These usually are good, and you can, once you pull it back, you can see if there's any wear or not in there. So now you can see, to get this out, there's not even, you can't even stick your pinky between this gear and this shifter shaft. Now this time we can go ahead and pull these forks out, but to do that the whole rod has to come out first, and it comes out this way. There's an Allen retainer nut on the back. We'll take off and pull this rod out this way. So let me get you on the other side and show you what's got to come off to get this rod out, and then you get your forks up. So this right here is what's got to come out. You can't really see it because it's so gummed up with gunk in it. but that is it right there. So we'll pull this out and then we can push the rod through. It's just like a little cap screw is all that it is. And then the clutch cover keeps the rod in on the other side, but on this side it requires this little cap. So we'll take that off and then we should be able to just push that through and then we'll grab it on the other side. Now we're back on this side. We just keep running back and forth, don't we? So I'll go ahead and pull this out. 1, 2, 3. Now what I like to do is as I pull the fork up, I'll slide it in there. Pull the middle one up, I'll slide it in there. Pull the last one out, I'll slide it in there. That way I've got them all the way that they go in, and you can inspect them, look for any kind of damage, any kind of chips or wear. Like this one's got some wear on it, not too bad. The other ones look good, so that middle one there is kind of dragging a little. All right. Now what you can also do is label 1, 2, 3, so you know how they go in. But what I do, I'll just clean this end off. I'll put a white tab here, white tab there, and then I know that goes in. Put a little chalk there. Now I know that goes in that way. As it correlates with the drum on top. That's what those little tabs were. And the top, let me get this. The little tabs here in the top set up inside your drum here. And as the drum turns, it turns those forks. And as the forks shift, it moves gears back and forth. Okay, so when we pull these gears out, we'll inspect all the gears, all the teeth, and the spline, and all the bearings as well. Now, if we were going to disassemble everything, and what we would do, if we were going to pull the gears and the shafts, if we were going to pull the shafts out of the trap door, what you would do is loosen these nuts up before you loosen the trap door up. But we're not doing that because we're just replacing this. So we're going to leave these nuts tight. We're not going to mess with any of the bearings or the seals. We're going to inspect them, but we're not going to pull them and mess with them. And then this hole, once we break the trap door free and tap a little love tap on the main shaft, this will all come out this way. Both shafts, all gears. Then we can change this. I did go ahead and put that set screw that retains this rod in on the other side just so I didn't lose it. And then we'll go ahead and get all the screws out of these trap doors. There's one here, and then here's supposed to be one here, here's supposed to be one there. Missing quite a bit. Not sure what that is. It's not a screw, but we'll see. So I assume that's stripped out. What's your guess? Stripped out or vibrated out and fell? Ooh, fell out. It was just like a little pin. Now everything is set to pull that trap door off and the whole gear assembly come out with it. And the way you do that is you take this inner race off and then tap with a soft mallet the main shaft, and it comes out and the whole gear assembly comes out with it. So this inner race has to come off. And I don't know if you can see this or not, But on this bike, the inner race has walked all the way in to the main gear here. It's supposed to be sitting way back here. And over time, this race has just kind of slowly crept and walked back into this. So you can't put your race puller on to get behind this race to pull it out because it's sitting up in there. So what do? Well, let me show you. So we'll now come to the right side of the bike. This here is your main shaft. So what I'll do is I will manually with my hands lock the gears so that the main shaft will not turn anymore. And I will put a socket on here and break this nut free. Take a soft mallet and drive this main shaft out enough, just enough, so I can get my tool on that inner race. I know we said we weren't taking these apart, but I have to break this loose in order to get that main shaft to come out to get behind that inner race. So I've got the transmission locked. This is a 1 1/16 nut. It is standard thread. Let me get an extension. With the transmission locked, I'll move it until it locks, and then I will just break this nut free. It's not under a great amount of tension. And then when we go to line this main shaft back up, it will align with this side. We'll just put a straight edge on it and get it as close as we need to. Now with that out, I'll get a rubber mallet and I will drive this out enough to get that inner race out. I'll put a soft mallet on here and use a rubber mallet back here. And let's go to the other side and see if we drove it out enough. So as you can see, I can get my fingernail back in there, and we did drive it out enough, I believe, to get the tool in there to pull this inner race out. Now these tools here, they used to be expensive to buy, but they're like 20-25 bucks now, so they're not bad at all. Let me take this one all the way out here and see if we've slid it out enough. And we have not. I want to slide it out just a little bit more so I can get that back here. Skit! Go! Where are you? Come on. Well, we had a little fiasco in the shop. My daughter's cat got up in the rafters. That's that noise you were hearing of a cat whining. So I went over to coach the cat down. Decided, well, I'll video that so I can see something comical. And I guess in the process of that and then me coming back to work here, I messed some videos up. So let's get back to this. The cat is down out of the rafters. My theory is if a cat gets up in a hard spot, it can get down from a hard spot. And it did in a noisy, clumsy way. But cats have how many lives? Like 18? So here's what happened in the video that I guess I didn't push record on. I gotta go get me, I think I wanna go get me a GoPro, Hero 11. I've researched those and those look like they'd be pretty good for what we do here. But anyway, we got this inner race off. We used this tool, which is really cheap but handy. So I was able to knock the main shaft in enough to get, well, let me run this back out so I don't mess nothing up. To get this back behind here, on here, I slowly walked it out. Okay, I didn't use an impact. Don't ever use an impact on walking this race out. And I used a ratchet, long-handled ratchet, 3/4 inch socket, and just turned turned, 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 until it got almost to about the point of here, and then I could just go ahead and rotate it all the way off. And then this just comes right off. Do replace these. Don't ever reuse these. Once you've walked it out and taken it off, if you put this back on, it will most certainly walk right back in to your main gear. So we have done that. We've taken it off. I took a rubber mallet and tapped, and the trap door is broke free. Now we can go to the other side and just pull the whole assembly out of the transmission case. Now here we are on the other side. As you can see, the trap door has come out, and now we can just gently slide easy this whole thing out. Here's our main shaft. That's where that inner race set. Here's all of our gears and bearings. Oh, there's the shifter rod, or the clutch rod, that just come out. And now remember, we'll have to set this back to the depth that it was at, but when you hammered this back out, more than likely it came out to where it's supposed to be, but we'll double check that to make sure. Okay, so we'll set that there in a safe place. I'll get my rod back. Now the rod is the same on both ends, and this rod's in good shape. We'll slide that back in our main shaft. So now you'll see this case is empty besides the main gear here. We don't have to pull that, we'll leave that in. We will check the roller bearings in here. We will replace the main seal. But now we can get our shifter shaft out. Now there's an adjustment for your shifter shaft right here. This little pin, as you run it in or out, it will move the position of where this shifts. I'm not going to touch that because you don't need to move this to replace this. So I'm going to leave this adjustment rod alone. We're going to go to the other side, take the little circlip pin off, clip off, and then this shifter shaft will slide out, the whole assembly, and we'll replace that. Now sometimes these can be a bugger to get out because they'll get wedged back behind that little beveled gear on this. So just take your time. All right, well, after about 14.3 hours, I did get this off. Now, don't reuse these, okay? Just get you a new one. Now, this is in pretty good shape, and they're kind of bendable, but just clip you a new one on there. Now, this shifter shaft is free. You'll have this little washer here that you can take off. And you'll have a shifter shaft seal back here. But now this whole assembly is free, and we'll just slightly tap it, and it will come right out. Okay, so there's the new one. And let me see if I can get this in. Here is the old one. You can see how flat these are up here and how damaged it was down here. I've just got a little cheap Harbor Freight seal puller that works really well for things like this. There's that. Now, you'll find on your main shaft, there's really nowhere that you're going to be able to get a seal puller up in here. So I'll show you a little trick to use. Don't be using no flathead in there and damaging up where the seal sets. So let me show you a little trick that'll help you and save some time. So a good tip to get these off, because they're sealed on this side and they're sealed around this main gear, is to get you a little wood screw and a drill gun and find you a good spot now where you can pry. So maybe up here, or probably right in here to pry against this is going to be the best. Now don't go all the way into the case. All right, just to where it goes into bites on the metal of this seal. And we'll get a hammer to grab that, and I just want to pry that seal out. And then that seal comes off. And as you can see, we didn't get back here. We just got through this metal piece. Now we'll clean this up. Now you can kind of see the inner workings here. There is a big circlip in here that holds this main bearing on. So this is a good time to inspect your main bearing, inspect this beveled shaft here. And remember, the beveled side goes that way and the flat side comes out. And then also inspect our roller bearings. You don't have to grease these because they're oil fed. That's why that seal is there. But we will clean up any just any contaminants in here, and then we'll put our new seal on. Okay, now that we have the main seal out, you might have a kit that comes with 2 main seals to go back in. And you say, well, I hold them up here, they're the same outside diameter, so they're good to go. But no, they're not. If you look on the back of your packaging, you might find that there is a main drive seal, and there's the part number, and then the trans main drive has a different part number. And that's for 95 to 05. And so the back of the packaging is telling me to use the 94 and under, which this is a 94. However, this is why I pull this off. If you put this up to go in here, it'll go in. And I did grease this. If you put this up to go in here, this is the one we're supposed to use, and it will not go in. Take your old seal. Look at the back of it. See how it's all metal? The back of this one is not. Okay, the back of the other one is. So this will be the one that we want to use. You will verify that by having this easily seat very carefully down in there, and it makes a good seal all the way around. Now I did oil the inside, I did oil this, and I did oil the outside here. Now with this in, we're ready to go on. And you know for a fact you have the right seal. Now I will push this to get it started evenly with my fingers, and that thing there is sealed in. Now if you want to verify, take your old seal, flip it around backwards, put it on there, and push as well. And you can even take you a little mallet or even a little hammer and just tap if you're careful, just to make sure that seal is indeed seated well. And so we can see we got a good clean lip all the way around. It's seated down inside this. Now in your main drive there is another seal here. It might look like a metal washer and you overlook it, but it's actually a seal. And so you will want to replace that as well in your kit. And we'll make sure to oil the inner lip of this. And then that replaced this seal here. So sometimes these are overlooked. Now there's also an O-ring that goes behind that inner race and rides on this to help seal it as well. So you don't forget that when we put the main shaft back in. So let's go ahead and put now our shifter shaft seal in. And then that should be kind of a finger press as well. And then I'll rubber mallet that on. we want to make sure that we slide it in over this when we go in. I'll grease the shaft up, or oil it up. I will oil where the adjuster sets. Alright. And then we will start the shaft back in here. We'll get it through the seal nice and easy. Okay. And then we'll make sure we can feel that adjuster pin setting up in there. And I might, oh, there we go. I'll go on the other side and check to verify, and there's our new spring, and everything is in there ready to go. Now we'll put our washer back on. You can reuse the washer. And then if we've got everything seated well, you'll see where the circlip sets. If it doesn't, if the circlip won't clip back in there, then you have not got something correct. So we'll put a new circlip on there. We'll get it loaded in the pliers. And then that should clip down, and you should be able to kind of move it around a little, but it is clipped and it is in there, and it is good. So now everything on this side is done. We'll clean these threads up. So we didn't move this. We've got this clipped in. We've got it seated in the adjuster. We've got our new main shaft seal. We've got our new inner main shaft seal. And now we're ready to go to the other side and start working on our gaskets that are going to go on the trap door and here on top. I like to go ahead and work on this gasket here, because while everything is out of the transmission, I can go ahead, if something falls down in here, I can clean it out and it's not falling down on the gears. Now, some things to remember when you're cleaning up your top end. Don't worry about things falling in, because you can easily wipe it out. But your finger is your best friend. So run your finger across. If you feel something, then it's not clean. So go ahead and clean it off more. But some of this might look like there's still gasket material on there, but it's just the imprint of it. And so that feels good. Around here as well feels good. And then stick you something in your oil hole and clean off the spout seal as well, where it mates. And pay special close attention around your dowel pins. So you want to clean around them real good, because gasket material usually gets caught down in between there, or pinched. And when you pull the old gasket off, it just doesn't all come off. So make sure you clean around all your pinholes. And another thing to remember is to take some compressed air and blow out every hole of your threads, every bolt hole on everything. Because as you're cleaning gasket material, they will fall down in there. And then when you go to torque your bolts, you won't have a proper torque because you got junk down in there. So go ahead and just blow those out. You don't have to thread clean them necessarily, but just blow all of them out. You'll be surprised at the junk that actually comes out there. And it's a good time to just kind of blow out your roller bearings. Now, I call these roller bearings, but they're actually probably needle bearings, if you want to correct me. Blow all that out and make sure everything's nice and clean. So before we can get our gear assembly back in, I'll take that shaft rod out. We're going to clean up this gasket material from the trap door that was kind of setting on this side. I'm not going to take any of these gears off. He said everything shifted fine and ran fine. All the gears were fine. The gears look great. I don't know about the roller bearings now because we've not taken any clips off to look, But everything turns really, really well. Nice and smooth. I don't see any of the gears ate up or anything. So I'm just going to focus on getting this gasket off the trap door, getting a new gasket on, and then we're ready to slide this back in. Now we got everything cleaned up, ready for our gaskets to go on. You want to make sure that your holes line up nice and well. And I use a little bit of this Durco German made by L-Ring gasket maker. That helps hold the gasket on there and also gives it a very good seal, just kind of as a precaution. Now I'll also go around the trap door, just a small light bead, and then we're ready for this to go in. Now I'll start with my main shaft up in the roller bearings, and the roller bearings have been oiled. I'll just work it real slow. Now make sure your dowel pin, I got one in the transmission case and one actually in the trap door. Now I want to eyeball while I kind of wiggle and make sure that this last gear seats up with the main gear and everything looks to be going in place. And with everything seated, we can kind of turn the gears and it looks like they're doing well. Now remember, we did loosen this nut and we will run that nut back in. Now these, let's lock a gear in. These nuts are supposed to be, you know, a one-time use, but we just really just loosened it and we're going to tighten it back up. I think it'll be fine. Now these nuts are torqued to 30 pounds. So we will torque it back. Now remember, we didn't take this one off. So it should be fine. There's 30 pounds. All right. I'll inspect everything over here. Everything over here is lining up well. My gears are all lining up. All right, we'll go in with our trapdoor bolts. We will blue Loctite these. We had that one there. And as I remember, this was missing the bolt. So we'll see if we can find a newer one for that. Okay, I found some bolts. I hope this one's long enough. It is not, so I'll have to find me a little longer one. Okay, we'll go ahead and put our oil spout on. This is cleaned up. We've got our gasket on this side. I did put some sealant on there. And I like to go ahead and put me some bolts in. I did blue Loctite them. And just to kind of get them started on there so that everything I know lines up as it should. And of course we will torque these down. You want to be careful not to over tighten these. I've seen this crack before and that's not good. Now, so nothing goes down in our oil, we can go ahead and put our oil spout back in, or dipstick in. And now we're ready to go ahead and run our forks in. Now remember, we did mark these up at the top so we know exactly how they came out and how they're going to go in. Now this first one sets all the way back here in this back groove up toward here. That's your fourth gear. This middle one is your second and third gear. No, second and first gear, I'm sorry. And then your last one is your third and 5th gear. Now I'm going to go around on the other side just to make sure I got that gear in, or that fork in, not the gear in. There we go. Now I'll take the rod and run it through here. I'll make sure that it starts and goes in every hole there. And that it goes down into our hole on the other side. I'll take this plug out and then we'll just kind of tap it in there. We'll make sure to put our clutch rod back in. And now we can clean everything up on this side and go back with our clutch case. But first I want us to work on the top here. So I want to go ahead and set the drum on and set the pawl and put the shifter lever on, and then we can test our transmission just to make sure we've got everything set right. So we will hold this spring up carefully and we will set everything back down on those dowels. Let me show you something interesting here. So I set the shifter drum back on, put it in neutral, all the forks line up, but my pawl sits right in the center of my shifter drum arm. It doesn't go back to fall down into the cams to shift. And I started looking at that and I'm like, what in the world is going on? I thought maybe I had something wrong with my drum or my forks, and checked all that, everything was fine. What I come to find out is that on the old one, the spring or the pawl is on the back of this main rod. On this one, the pawl is on the front. If it was on the back, it would set down where it's supposed to. Now, luckily there's a C-clip or a circlip there. I can pop off, slide this shaft off, put this arm back over here where it's supposed to be. And I noticed when I got it, hey, this is kind of sloppy. You know, this one is not. And that's the reason. They assembled this wrong. So pay attention when you're assembling these together. And if something don't add up right, well, there you go. And this pawl is kind of thicker anyway than this. So I might just put this one on this assembly. Well, boy, was that a task. I'll tell you what. The problem was they had this shifter pawl on this side of the pin. And these pins are pressed in. So that's why I didn't even check it. And then when I got it on here, it didn't fit. And I'm like, hey, this is on the wrong side. So I took it off and the pin fell out. So they didn't even press this pin in to this shaft here. So once I press it in, of course, put the spring on the right side and the shifter pawl on the right side and got it all hooked up. Got the drum bolted down, got it in neutral, so no gears engaging. All right, hold on, that's first gear. There. Now, no gears engaging. That's neutral. Now we'll shift to first. There's first. Now our first gear is engaged. We'll go back to neutral. Nothing. Now we'll go to second. There's second. Third. There's third. Fourth. And fifth. There we go. Shift down. Fourth. Third. Second. And there's neutral. Now, if you needed to adjust the shifter pawl where it sets, what you'll do is you'll put it in third. So let's see, I'll go to second, I'll go to third. And then you'll see where your paw is. Boy, I don't like that spring either. But you'll measure where your paw is, and it should be almost in the middle, your paw teeth of the two cams. So you always do that in third gear. This one looks good. That's good. If you needed to adjust it, you break this nut free here and then turn this in or out. It's got a kind of like a lopsided stud on it that will turn this paw in and out. All the gears look good. Looks like everything's adjusted well. Now I'll remove this and get it kind of set at the angle that we should set it at, and I'll kind of show you that. Okay, so to set the angle that this should be at, you want as much movement on this way as you can go this way. So lift this arm up, go this way. Well, let me get on the other side. So lift your paw up, you'll go this way and back this way. You want it to be right in the middle of those two, and it looks like it is. So straight up is where I've got this set, so we're going to leave it at that. Now I did go ahead and put this plug back in and ran it in to where it's smooth, and that holds that shifter rod. Now I also wrapped it in plumber's tape because oil could leak out of here, so I wrapped it with some tape and ran it back in there. All right, we got our clutch cover gasket on there, got everything cleaned up good. We did check the ball and ramp on this, and she's ready to go back in. Make sure our dowel pins are there and lined up. We'll just find them, press it on there, and we've already Loctited our bolts. We'll slide them in. These are all the same length on this model. You want to keep pressure on it because that cable down here is probably going to push against you. I'll go in a crisscross pattern, and these are torqued to 75 inch-pounds. So we'll go back through and torque these. The top is torqued at 75 as well. So when I put the top on, we'll go through and torque every one of them. Now with the transmission drain plug in, this cover on, and now all the seals assembled on the other side, we can now pour some oil down in here. And I'll pour about a half a quart just to get it on top of the gears. I don't like to pour it in here and then dry start with the gears not oiled. So I'll pour the oil down in here, let it run down in all the gears, and I'm not sure if that helps or not, but I just like doing it that way. I'm sure there was somebody screaming and hollering at me saying, "You forgot something, you forgot something." Sure did. That's why I always have my parts on the lift that need to go back in it. I just didn't look down and see it, and I'm glad I didn't put oil in it yet, or we would be losing oil. Well, well, well. Now I feel better. Sure wouldn't have worked like that. Sure wouldn't have worked like that. Now let's see what we got. Okay, so I went ahead and put the Wahoo DD on. Went ahead and put the nut on. It is reverse thread, remember that. Red Loctite, torqued, and then this lock plate on. Blue Loctite, torqued, and that nut's not going anywhere. I put the new tire on the back. I did tighten up the belt. I rolled the tire over and lined the belt up nice and even. Now we're ready for this main shaft or inner race bearing. So the inner race bearing, just clean up the threads good. Take the old bearing and compare it to the new one. Make sure it's the same everywhere you need it to be. So we're good there. Never put a race on or bearing on dry, or gasket for that matter. So we'll lube that up. We'll lube the inside as well. We'll slide that on. Now I have seen guys use PVC pipe and stuff to bang that on, but I do these so much I just went and got a tool. This tool is really handy to have. Let me back this all the way out. It's got a little roller bearing on here. This threads on to here, so I'm going to put a little bit of oil on there. I'm going to oil my threads up here, and it is a reverse thread. Do that again. That one was for a 6-speed. That should be the one I need. Yeah, okay. So I'll run this nut all the way out with the washer. I'll go ahead and thread this on. It doesn't have to be tight, but it needs to be all the way up on all the threads. Now this is just a hollow shaft that slides on. That will, nope, wrong size. All right, my problem was I've got this big spacer, but it's for a different bearing or a different race. But I did find a piece of pipe that is perfect. Little rusty, but perfect for that. Now, I just hope it's long enough. I'll tell you what, I'll put a couple of washers on there. Hey, where's the old race? Aha! There we go. That'll give me the length I need. We'll thread this on. And we'll grab some vice grips to grab this. All right, get this out of the way. And then we will simply tighten our nut up. As we do, it will draw that bearing or that race on. It's going up there nice and easy. This is a lot better than hitting it with a PVC pipe. Break this free. So we've got a little bit more ways to go, but I'm running out of space here on my spacer. I know it's rinky-dink. I know. But it's working. I don't have far to go at all. Let's go a little bit more. And say, well, how do you know how far to go? Well, I'll show you a little trick so you don't have to get your filler gauges out and try to bend them and all that. You take your tool that you use to pull the bearing and you set it up in there, make sure it goes behind it, and you see how much play you've got. So we've still got a lot of play there. So let's take it in a little bit. Other way, other way. Now let's see. Perfect. Now let's break this free and visually inspect it. See what we're working with now. Okay, I think it needs to go a little bit more. All right, I'm happy with that. Well, last night my video went down on me again, so Apologize about that. I will try to rectify it with some type of new video system. But what's been done, of course, you saw we put the race in and we measured it where it should be. Did set the starter back in and the shaft, the bolts for that. The exhaust is back on, though I did leave this off just so we would have a little bit more room to work in here. Now, anytime you replace this inner race, you need to replace the bearing that sits in the inner primary. And so our kit came with a new bearing, and we'll be installing that now. So the bearing here does have a circlip in it. We'll get us some pliers in there. Our kit does come with a new circlip. I'd like to get me some locking circlip pliers, you know, that when you push them in, they don't go back out. They kind of lock. If you guys have a source or a brand that you like and prefer, please let me know. I'd love to have a set. There we go. And we do have a new circlip to go in. And then what we'll do is push this bearing out. But on the back side we have two seals. This is your main seal here, or your clutch seal. We'll pull that. You have another circlip in here. It did come with two, so we will replace both. They are the same. So we'll replace both sides on that. There we go. Looks like a 5/8 fits down in there pretty well. There we go. And there's what that seal looks like. And here is our new seal. Everything lines up well with that. And then we will oil this. We'll clean out our hole. And then this will be set in from the, like that, from the inside up. And remember, wherever you're trying to keep oil in, you will use this side. If you're trying to keep oil out, you will use this side. So we're trying to keep oil in the primary. This is the inner primary. So the seal will go like this, but be pushed in from the back side up. And then our shaft goes in here. Now your kit might come with two seals. One's a little bigger diameter than the other, the inner diameter. The outsides are the same. So a good way to test if you've got the right seal. Okay, so this is down inside. Your lip that the seal sets on is right there. That little lip right there, this seal will set on. And it sets not like that, but like this. So what you'll want to find, if you're going to hammer it in, is a socket that's going to set over that little lip. Okay? You don't want a socket setting on this. You want something that goes in between this lip of the gap. Set that on there. Just like that, and that's what you want. So we'll oil that up and we'll drive that in. And you'll just feel with your fingers. Make sure it's nice and flat down in there. And this was a 11/16 that I used to drive that in. Now once you press that old bearing out, go ahead and put your new one in the freezer the night before. And that will help you. And what I'm going to do is just tap it to get it started. And I'm going to go over to the press and press it in until it gets to the back of that new circlip we just put in. I'll use a 1.5 inch. Fits on it very well. And then we'll press that in down to the bottom of our new circlip that we put in at the bottom. So we want it to go right up against that. When you're pressing in the bearing, words of caution. On a 20-year-old, almost 20-year-old inner case, you could crack the inner primary. So I was trying to do something nice and replace that bearing for him, and unfortunately it bit me. Ask me how I know. Had to replace it. So we're going to be putting this one on, which is in a great shape, a whole lot better than that. Just got to take this off. Already got bearing in, and the seals. Had to get a new starter shaft seal, new main seal. And let's take this over to the bike and we'll grease everything. I want to show you a couple things, words of caution when you're putting this in that could mess you up down the road. So 3 things you want to be aware of when you're putting that inner primary back on. You have the new seal that'll go on here. This is the old seal. You have your starter shaft seal that goes around here. You have your main seal that goes over this race, and then your bearing sets on this race. You got to pay attention to all 3 seals when you're sliding this inner primary on. The reason for that is you could booger this seal up, booger this one up, booger this one up, and what will happen is it'll leak. It'll leak from one of those 3 places. So pay attention, please, when you're putting it on. Be careful. If something doesn't feel right, don't force it. Because you got to understand, you're setting seals on all 3 of these. And just take your time. Just be patient with it and take your time. So when you're putting the crank seal on, or the, I don't know what it's called, the big seal across the crankcase, you'll want to clean the surface well, because sometimes people use like a silicone seal to go on that, and this person that was in here last did. So you want to get all that off. If not, your new O-ring will not make a good seal. So what I like to do is go flat across the surface here, and then I'll go flat across this lip. There shouldn't be much trash, but if they did use that silicone, you'll have to get all of that off, because that will cause a leak. I mean, we're leaking anyway everywhere, but I don't want to be the cause of a leak. Now, some kits you buy, you'll have a fatter O-ring and a thinner O-ring, and they will be different in diameters. So you always want to match what come off, which was the thinner one, and it is the bigger diameter one, so it will go on, fit on there well. Never put O-rings on dry, so I'll put a little oil in my fingers and just work it around. Now usually these will set on and stay on, but if not, you might have to use a little bit just to tack it on, just to get it to set in that lip. But this one is setting well, and that is installed. Now our other seals are already on the inner primary, so we'll oil them up. The back side of the inner primary surface is cleaned, and I went ahead and cleaned the outside since it was off. Your kit will also come with some new lock tab washers for that inner primary. There should be 6 of them to lock in. Now, before you set this inner primary on, there's some things you have to do. Oil up your O-ring around your crankcase. Make sure it's seated in that lip good all the way around. Get your peepers underneath there. Make sure it's seated. I oil up my starter shaft. I oil up my race. I oiled up my race main shaft seal. I oiled up my starter seal. Now before you set this up on there, the bolts, go ahead and clean your bolts up. Put your new lock washers on, and you want one tab down and the other 2 tab up toward the head. On these, you'll find there's 2 long ones, there's 1 medium long one, and then there are 2 short ones that go on the inside. Then on the outside here and here, you've got 2 bolts with flat head washers. Now clean the threads up and don't put Loctite on them. Instead, what the manual says is to put RTV, gasket maker, on them. So just apply some on the thread, make sure it goes all the way around. I usually put it about halfway up. Okay, about like that. I'm going to go ahead and do all the bolts like that. Even these on the outside. I don't think it's required, but I'll just go ahead and put it on there. And then these bolts are torqued to 20 foot-pounds. And there is a sequence to torquing them that I'll show you once we get the inner primary on. Now also on the inner primary, on the back, where your bolt holes are, I will put a little bit of gasket maker around all my bolt holes. We don't want this primary leaking out your threads. So just like that, just apply a little bit just around those. Now everything's oiled up, everything's greased up. It's time to go. Now the manual says do take some electrical tape and tape around your threads here and here so you don't damage the seal. But I start here by getting my eyeballs down here and going in this way, so I don't ever really have to cover those up because I can just sit here and eyeball it and watch it. Now this main shaft seal is what you want to pay very close attention to. There you go. And then the bearing goes up over the race. Very good. Now it'll kind of set on there. Now your shortest bolts with the lock tabs on them will go closest to your crankcase. So we're just going to kind of finger thread those in for now. With that RTV on there, they get really tight really quick. Your 2 outer ones, we'll just screw on there just to get them started. Now your 2 longest ones will go down here at the bottom and over here on this side. And then your mid long one will go right there in the front of your main shaft. Now there is a torquing sequence to these. So they're all 20 foot-pounds, but you'll tighten your 4 engine mount bolts first to 20 foot-pounds. You'll make sure your lock washers are lined up good. And I think it's, I don't know, 18 to 21 foot-pounds, so I'll just go with 20. Now there'll be a gap back here until you push this up and seat this up well. So you want to make sure that this seal closes up really well where it's supposed to be closed. And make sure your tabs are locked in there where you can lock one down. I like to start with this bottom one first. I'll watch my case up top. Then I'll go across on the outside. Then I'll come inside here as well. And then down here. Then I'll recheck all my torques. They might loosen up on you as it sets in there. All right. And then your other 3 back here to your transmission. And once everything's torqued down, don't forget to go back here with some pliers and lock those new tabs down. so that your bolts don't back out. I use, if you've got access to two, leave one open. That way the next feller can use the other one to bend back. All right, now our inner primary is on. And I forgot, this is a little bit different setup. You don't really even have to oil this starter seal because that little spacer goes back in there. And we can go ahead, since we got it oiled up, and put our shaft in. Wiggle it in nice and soft. Turn it a little where it'll seat. Well, now why aren't you sitting in there? All right, let me go ahead and get you back out. Wiggle that in. There we go. Now we'll put our spring on. We'll put plunger up. And then when you're putting the jack shaft together, you might want to consider replacing this little washer because it's got a little O-ring there as well, and a little lock tab there that locks down into there. I will put some blue Loctite on that bolt and get that tightened down. Then our inner primary is on and ready for the clutch and the compensating sprocket. All right, so the reason I was having such a time with this starter jack shaft, I kept trying to tighten, it wouldn't tighten down. I'm like, what's going on? Well, I forgot to, once I put the inner primary on, to hook the starter bolts back in and bring the starter up to that seal. Then this fit fine and everything looks like it's spinning fine. I'm going to hook the battery up and hit the start button just to make sure this is ejecting out nice and smooth, and especially going back in. You keep an eye on it. Tell me what she does, because I've got to, it's a push button starter. All right, so it sounds like it plunged out and plunged back in. So I think that everything's good. Now I also put the shifter linkage in, and on these you can take this bracket off the back and then slide the shaft through that way. So you don't have to worry about putting it on before the inner primary. Now this back here, you do. That needs to go on before the inner primary if you're going to run the bolt this way. However, let me give you a little trick. This lever here goes to the transmission to shift. It's threaded all the way through. So what I like to do is run my bolt the opposite way, put this on the back side. You still got tons of room. These have like a ball bearing that turns, so there's no bad angles. And this way you can easily look down and inspect to make sure this linkage is still tight, because you still got threads coming out. So if you run into that, no big deal. I like to do this anyway, and it still shifts fine. There's no binding or no kind of rubbing of anything. So all right, so before we put our pegs on, of course, let's go ahead and get our outer clutch in and our sprocket. We're going to set both up as a whole assembly. We're going to be careful of these splines, and especially this threaded part. But again, I'm down here eye level where I can see. Now it's kind of a balancing act, because you've got to get your adjustment up over this washer or over this bolt, then set everything in. So it's kind of a juggling act, but I'll go ahead and try to get this bolt in. Slide that on, get the bolt in. Now I can work on, oh, well, goodness. Let me go ahead and set this basket on, just kind of set it on. Then maybe we can Bring this up just enough. Bring that bolt in. Oh yeah. There we go. Oh yeah. And put this on so we don't lose our chain. Make sure that's seated well. We'll just put this up here just to keep everything together. We'll be pulling this bolt back off, but let's just put it on here for now. And then it's a tight fit, but it's wiggling. There we go. And our nut will run the rest of that down for us. My apologies, I've torqued this nut down and this nut down, red thread lock, tightened the primary chain and forgot to hit record. So I can't take it all back apart just for you, but I do have a video of a similar model that we did a clutch pack, or actually a new basket for. And so check that out. Now, since we did not have to take the clutch apart, we left the setting where it was before. So we can put this back in and take our O-ring or snap ring and snap it in and make sure it is seated in the groove. And you can tell by the way it spreads itself out that it is. So now all of this is done and we're ready to put on our new gasket and our primary cover. Then we'll put our floorboards on, we'll put our shifter pegs on, we'll put our rear peg on, and then we're good to take it down the road. Oh, the handlebars, I do want to show you what I did there on the handlebars. Then besides that, it'll be ready to go. Okay, so we got the rear floorboard back on, we got the front floorboard back on, we got our outer cover on. So setting the height on your toe shifter is as easy as taking your shoe off, putting your shoe up there, seeing how it fits, and that'll tell you. So that might be a little too snug, but I think that's going to be just right because you're going to have some play in this. You don't want it too high because then when you try to shift, you're really raising up and extending your feet all the time. So just take your shoe off, put it in there. That's how you set that. If you're barefoot, I don't know what to tell you. So everything's back together except these handlebars. Now the top of the bags, the bag lids were not like this, but the customer, he does pinstriping. I didn't know that. It's not the pinstriper that I've talked about before on the channel, but he got some gold leaf and he wanted to try that. So I think it turned out all right. So you'll see a difference in this between the first video. But on the handlebars, he had a problem with his bars moving on him, no matter how much he tightened them. So what I did was drilled through the riser clamp, through the bar, just the top of the bar, not all the way through. Then I threaded the top clamp and run a set screw in through here and down into the bar. And now the bars are solid and they're not going anywhere. Now you could do the other side, but it's kind of redundant. And you could get a top clamp, but this is better. It uses the original stuff and I don't have to worry about it not fitting if I ordered something and it wasn't cut out. This is a two-piece. Some of the newer models have the one-piece. The one-piece has what is called gorilla clamps, and they'll clamp down both sides. But it's hard to find one that's separate like this, and I didn't want to get a solid and it get in the way of the cover or anything like that. So I'll put the cover on, we'll get it off the lift, I'll take it down the road. Well, I took it for a test drive. It would downshift great. It would not upshift. Like, what the crap? Wouldn't upshift at all. So I turned around, come back to the shop. I had the shifter pegs on backwards. So the front shifter, the toe shifter, goes on first, duh, and then the heel shifter goes on last. So if you saw that in the video, that was a mistake. I was yapping with you, having a good time, and didn't even think about the orientation of the shifts. Hey, it shifts once I've swapped them out, went down the road, it shifted like a brand new bike. It's got some carburetor or ignition issue or something. It's popping and sputtering, so I'm gonna contact the customer and see what he wants to do about that, because we didn't do anything motor-wise to it. So I know there wasn't anything we did, we just did transmission and primary. So we'll see if he wants us to address that, or if he's got some trick, some switch or something that leans it out or something. I think it's running too rich, it's popping out the tailpipes. So maybe I don't have something turned on right. This has been fabricated quite a bit over the years. So maybe there's a trick to it, I don't know. But we successfully fixed that shifter shaft by pulling all the gears out of the transmission, putting everything back together, no leaks, shifts like a Cadillac. So thank you so much for hanging out with me in the shop, and tell your mama now I said hi.